Welcome to our 8th and final session of this Reversing Diabetes seminar, Maintaining a Healthy Lifestyle. You know, it feels good to feel good, to be healthy, to have vigor and vitality. So what does it take to move toward total health? How do you achieve and maintain? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to take control of you. Nobody else can do that for you. You are the steward of what happens in your life, and this takes commitment and ongoing action. There are 4 tips for building success. Number 1, build a strong foundation. Then use diversion if you need to help you stay on track. Plan ahead. And finally, set goals. So let's talk about each of those. The place to start is with a good breakfast. Make it substantial with a generous amount of fiber grams. This sets you up for success all day long. It gives you the energy that you need. If you're flying from the East Coast to San Francisco, you wouldn't wait until you get to San Francisco to fuel up the plane. You might run out somewhere along the way. Same thing with your health. The most important meal of the day is your breakfast. That's where you also have the strongest insulin response. Your body has reserves that it's built up during the night to help you deal with the big breakfast that you should be eating. So learn to eat a big breakfast if you're not a breakfast person. When badly tempted, use diversion. When you're struggling with that temptation, don't go into the bakery and stand in front of the sweet counter and expect yourself not to buy something. Use diversion. Go outside and take a walk or take a deep breath. Call a friend. Refocus. Perhaps what you want to do is drink a glass of water. Hunger oftentimes can be because you're thirsty. So drink the glass of water, or maybe 2 8-ounce glasses of water. You can also say a prayer. You know, there's a scripture, 3 John 3:2, that says, I pray that you may be a prosper. And I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health. So that's God's will for you. If you pray anything according to His will, He hears you. So let's do that. Use that. It's available to us, and it's His gift to us. And then contact a supportive friend. Friends can help you out. They can make or break you in your decisions of what you would like to do with your health. Then plan ahead. Write out a menu. Use your one-day plan and sit down and plan what you're going to eat on this given day. You can make allowances for using leftovers in there, but plan it out. Then make it for a couple of days. Then make it for a week or for the weekend. And then after you've done that, plan your shopping list. There's nothing more frustrating than starting to do a recipe and discovering that you don't have one of the ingredients. So make sure that you have what you need for what you're planning to eat. And then shop when you're not full, so you're not so badly tempted. People who shop when they're hungry always buy more. And a lot of it is the sweet stuff or the fat stuff or the processed foods, so they can immediately alleviate their hunger. Plan ahead. Fixing food may take longer because you're fixing a different type of food and you're not familiar with the recipes. And you can't necessarily depend on quick fixes like frozen dinners or a trip through the drive-thru if you're going to maintain this lifestyle. So find the new, healthier quick fixes. Things like whole wheat pasta with prepared sauce, or frozen vegetables to use with stir fry, or you can keep canned beans in the pantry perhaps to help you out. My wife actually does a lot of her home canning, and when she's going to use the dry beans that I grow for her in the garden, she'll go downstairs and pull some out and do a whole pressure canner or 2 or 3 at a time, and then the shelves are stocked for a few weeks and we're good to go. Plan ahead. Keep fresh veggies cleaned and in the refrigerator, ready to go for that instant snack when you need something. Use them to add to salad greens or pack some for lunch. You can also toss some in soup to make a stew. It's great at increasing the fiber content. Use them for pizzas and toppings. Plan ahead. I had a friend that always used to bring the most fabulous looking food into work. And I asked him, how on earth do you, as a single guy, manage to bring such good looking food into work day after day? I said, I don't know where you get the time. And he said, well, I don't cook that often. He said, I cook one day a week. And he would cook what he cooked for the one day a week. He would cook a large portion, triple, quadruple the size, but he had purchased containers for himself, and he would portion these out into the containers and what he would be eating for a lunch and stick them in the freezer. Then when he was ready to go to work in the morning, he would simply go out and pull out one of those dinners. Maybe it was something he hadn't eaten in 3 weeks, but he would pull it out, stick it in his lunch. By the time lunchtime rolled around, it had already thawed. It was ready to put in the microwave and heat, and voila, he had these gourmet-looking, great meals that were already ready. So you can do a similar type thing for that. Plan ahead if you're going to eat out. I encourage you to look at the menus online. You can find a lot of things there. Most good restaurants have a vegetarian selection, or if you read through, you can find things that are low-fat, heart-healthy. Oftentimes they'll have a little insignia or symbol that indicates which items are low in fat or heart-healthy, or sometimes even diabetic-friendly selections. And if that doesn't work for you, call ahead or ask to speak to the chef once you get there. They're always willing to please, and some of the best meals that I have ever eaten have been meals where I ask the chef, I tell him, I want to eat plant-based for lunch today. What is your best option? And he will pull out the stops to make me happy. And how do I treat him? Well, I tip him well, and then I go back and I take my friends back. And we have made him happy over and over again by doing things like that. So set goals. Make sure again that they're specific. We've talked about our SMART goals, not general goals like I'm going to do better. Well, that doesn't mean much, but you want something specific. I'm going to eat more fresh vegetables, and I will eat them so many times this week. I'm going to limit eating out to once a week. That will save on your grocery budget as well. Be sure you set your realistic goals, not too big, like I'm going to lose 50 pounds. You'll give up on that long before you ever get there. But make it an easily attainable goal. I'm going to lose 1 pound a week for 4 weeks. That's easily attainable. You can measure it, you can benchmark it, and you'll know if you're on target or if you need to take corrective action. Then set goals for yourself that are sustainable. For instance, you might say, I'm going to walk to the mailbox each day this week. Now for me, that is about 1/3 of a mile from my house to my mailbox. So that's pretty significant walk to go there and back. I've walked 2/3 of a mile. If I do that every day this week, I can do that. Versus I'm going to hike the Fiery Gizzard Trail. Well, if I were to hike the Fiery Gizzard Trail, I would have to get in my car, drive 15 minutes. The Fiery Gizzard Trail is 14 miles long, and so it takes quite a while to walk the length of the trail. Once I'm to the end, I either have to hitch a ride or I have to turn around and come back, which is another 14. Totally unrealistic and is certainly not sustainable. So, get back to the basics. Look in Dr. Neil Bernard's book for Reversing Diabetes. Chapter 4 is filled with good ideas of the basics to do and to help keep you on track and to help you achieve your weight loss and diabetes reversal goals. Evaluate what you're eating. Are there too many hidden oils in it? This is usually where people seem to trip up when they come into our program. They come in and say, well, my sugars are still running high in the mornings. Well, the first question that we ask them is, what did you eat last night? Well, maybe last night they had a high-fat meal, and that high-fat meal will have probably driven their glucose up this morning. So look at that. Are you eating too many nuts? Is it too much peanut butter and jelly? Do you need to keep a food log? Are there too many hidden sugars there? Perhaps it's cheese. You thought the cheese was protein when the cheese is mostly fat by calories. So, are you reading the nutrition facts? If you're buying prepared foods, you can easily find these on the label. They're mandatory, required by law. So are you reading the ingredient list? Did you find partially hydrogenated vegetable oils there? Remember, those drive the inflammation and increase your insulin resistance. Are you getting enough fiber? Do a quick fiber check. Make lists of the foods you eat and total your fiber grams. How is the score ranking up? Be sure that you're getting at least that 40 grams to 45 grams of fiber a day. Remember, that is the minimum. And then you can look to other references to help you with this. The Full Plate Fiber Guide is a wonderful reference just to stick in your pocket. And as you go through that fiber guide, you'll notice there are items that are shaded in blue. Anything that's shaded in blue in your fiber guide is a fiber superfood. Those are the kind of foods that you want to load up on and make sure that you're getting plenty of, as opposed to those that are not shaded in blue. And many of those that are not shaded in blue have no fiber in them at all. So, simplify. Simple meals can be some of your best meals. They're easier to prepare and they're more nutritious for you. So as you're eating the whole foods, the fewer the ingredients, oftentimes you might find that the better it is for you. Simple foods rather than highly processed foods. That's what we're driving at. Natural rather than processed. Add more raw foods to your meal. I was doing some research a number of years ago at one of the libraries in North Carolina. They've set up regional health education networks. And the library in Asheville, the mountain area health education network, was just a wonderful place to go to read, to study, to learn about health and more healthful living. And so while I was there, I was working in on a heart floor, medical step-down unit where we dealt with a lot of cardiovascular issues. And we were doing a lot of teaching. We called it our Heart Path program. And one of the things that we would tell the people is how to eat foods. But I became aware that we need to increase the nutrient value in the foods. And I also became aware that most people in the United States eat their food in a cooked format. Well, cooking might make it taste good, processing might make it taste good, but is it really the best thing for you? And so I started doing a little calculation. I discovered that a person could virtually double the nutrient intake of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients by simply adding one serving for every meal of something that is fresh. A fresh apple for breakfast, maybe a pear or a peach or a banana or something like that. One fresh serving with each meal. At lunchtime, you throw in a salad. There's all kinds of salads we can make. It doesn't just have to be a tossed green salad with a little romaine lettuce or whatever thrown in there. There's all kinds of things. You can add lots of ingredients. Look at some of these natural food cookbooks. Get you lots of ideas and learn how to add fresh foods to the meals that you do. And then there's things as simple as a green smoothie. Easy to do. Throw them in the blender, add your kale, add your pineapple, add your apple, add your orange or whatever ingredient it is. And when you're done, you come up with an all-fresh smoothie. Tastes great, is good for you, and can add lots of stuff there. So if you plateau, add more raw foods, add more chopped vegetables, do more salads and fresh fruits, and stop eating when you feel full. Lay that fork down, get away from the table, and start doing that 20 to 30 minutes of moderate exercise that you need to do after every meal. When you're done, probably the urge that you're not quite satisfied will have left you, and be mindful of your eating. You know, you eat a lot more potato chips when you eat the potato chips out of the bag than you do when you put the potato chips on the plate. That same goes true of most anything. If you'll take the food and you put it on your plate and look at it on the plate, you can gauge portion sizes a little better. You will know better what you're eating, and you'll be able to take corrective action before it's too late. And then, if you plateau, consider your exercise. Increase the intensity of the exercise or the duration. Maybe you need to add a few more repetitions to your burst training sessions. Are you doing just 5? It might be time to go to 7 or 8. Ultimately, you know, we want to get up to at least 10. And as you get more used to it, instead of doing just 20 minutes for your burst, see if you can make 30 minutes. And then after a period of time, see if you, not 30 minutes, but 30 seconds. See if you can go to 30-second intervals, then 40-second intervals, then 60-second intervals. And 60 seconds is probably the optimal. So you exercise vigorously for 60 seconds, you're panting hard, you're working hard, then you stop and rest or do very mild exercise for about a minute, 1 to 2 minutes, then go again. So exercise is beneficial, but lack of exercise is not the primary reason for weight problems. The primary reason for most weight problems is usually focused somewhere in the diet. So examine that as well. And if your blood glucose is not coming under control, again, go back to the basics. Go to Dr. B's book, Chapter 4. Go to our reversal plan. Consider each one of those items that are on the reversal plan and see how you stack up. How are you doing? And if it may be time to go through the exercise that we did here a session or 2 ago, where you actually write them out and look at the barriers for preventing you from achieving your goal. If you're not overweight, the same tips we've just covered about diet are keys for bringing your glucose under control. But what if the glucose is still not coming under control? Avoid those high-calorie foods, especially the fatty foods. So you don't want to do fried foods, but you also don't want to do other things like nuts and avocados and things of that nature. It may be that your body has so many reserves built up that it just can't handle what you're feeding it. So back off on that a little bit, and you should notice as you cut down on your total caloric intake that your blood sugar will come under control. In most individuals on a restricted calorie diet, they can get the blood sugar under control within about a week. Then avoid sugary foods and choose healthy, carbohydrate-rich foods, because the fibers in those carbohydrate-rich foods, if you're eating the whole food, the plant-based foods, the fibers will feed you slowly instead of spiking your sugar, and you're going to make some significant progress then in your blood sugar. And if all that still doesn't work, perhaps you have a high stress level. Are you managing the stress in your life well? Stress releases cortisol. Cortisol is a steroid. It drives the blood sugar up. That natural fight or flight response. Are you having conflicts at work or something of that nature? You know, a rise in blood sugar used to be good when you had to be running from the predators or when there were warring tribes around. But our society, you don't see a lot of that anymore. And if your glucose is still not under control, maybe it's job worries. Is there some corrective action you need to take there? Sit down and go through the process. Look at barriers to you achieving your good glucose control and consider some of these things. These could all be altering your blood sugar. Are you having financial difficulties? Is it maybe time that you need to look for a new job? Do you need some job retraining? Do you need to be on a different path? What is causing the stress in your life? And are you having conflicts with your neighbors? Is it somebody at church? Perhaps you need to shop for another church home. Or maybe you need to sell your house and move into a different neighborhood. Sometimes the solutions are drastic, but most of the time it's just little things that you can do. Perhaps it's time to take the neighbor a loaf of bread, or maybe help them out if they're in the hospital, mow the lawn, or something like that. They'll never think of you the same again if you perform an act of kindness for them. Maybe you're having health problems. Perhaps there's some kind of infection. It might be time for you to see your doctor, because infections and inflammation can drive some of those stresses as well. Stress, if temporary, you should see your blood sugar spike return to normal fairly quickly, within just a few days. But if it still remains ongoing, it's time to seek medical help. Don't be a hero. Don't keep holding out thinking you can solve all your problems yourself. Get help if you need it. Seek qualified medical care. See your doctor, because it could be something as simple as a urinary tract infection, or a sore foot, or an earache that is ultimately causing your problem. And once those problems are resolved, then the blood sugars will usually resolve and come back to normal. What about persistent hunger? My first question is, are you eating enough? Enough high fiber foods, that is, because the high fiber provides you with satiety. So step back, write down what you're eating, total your fiber grams. See how you're doing. Are you making at least those 45 grams? Maybe you need to go to 50 or 60 grams of fiber a day. Make sure that you're getting a low-fat diet and you're doing low glycemic index. We haven't talked much about glycemic index, but many diabetics find that it's a very useful tool for helping them select foods. As long as you're following the food plan and eating the proportions of foods that are there, you are eating foods that are low on the glycemic index, especially those first three categories. So we don't worry a lot about it. But if some of you would like to do a little further research in this area, the best site I know of, the best website I know of is glycemicindex.com. It's from the University of Australia, I think it is, in Sydney. And they've done a fantastic job of measuring the glycemic index on all these foods. And the lower the glycemic index, the better it is. You can actually do a search there. Say, I want all foods with a glycemic index of less than 50, and you have low glycemic index foods that you can probably eat freely of without having to measure portion sizes or anything of that nature. So if you're eating from the first three categories of our food list, you're getting good foods. You don't have to measure those portion sizes on those first three categories, although the other categories, you do need to be mindful about that. And you don't have to do calorie counting if you're following the food plan. You cannot eat everything or anything, but you can eat freely of high fiber, low fat foods. And you can eat high nutrient, low calorie foods. So cravings, what about them? Well, cravings are triggered by biological properties of the foods themselves. And there's some foods that seem to actually have addictive properties to them. It's in their chemical makeup. And only certain foods lend themselves to cravings. So the same foods seem to tempt everybody else in the same way. That's because they're more like a drug than a food. And there's 4 types of these foods. It's not as strong as a drug, but they trigger a biochemical effect in your brain that's very much like those of drugs. And those 4 foods are sugar, chocolate, cheese, and meats. So we've got to be careful with those because they stimulate the brain's pleasure center. And Dr. Bernard says, if it acts like a drug, then treat it like a drug. So these are foods that you may want to eliminate from your diet. When we have a craving for food, when we want something to eat, and we know that we've already eaten something, but you've just got that craving that can't be turned off, it's not apples or asparagus or bananas that you typically turn to. What most people turn to are one of those 4 food categories. You know, they're going to get a cup of ice cream, or they get a candy bar, or they get a hamburger, or they get something like that. It'll be something out of one of those 4 food categories. So those are the foods we turn to, and they are more foods because they have more than foods, because they have this chemical effect on the brain. So we've got to be careful with them. Best way to deal with them: stop teasing yourself. Don't eat them. Set them aside completely, at least for now. And don't even keep them in the house, because if you keep them in the house, that's what you're going to go to. So don't even buy them. Don't put them in your shopping cart. Just look the other way and walk on by. Don't eat them at the office. If someone brings them in and sets them down on your counter, carry them into somebody else's office. Let them deal with it, or get rid of them. Most of all, don't worry about tomorrow. Just take care of today. You can handle the cravings, the addictions for food, one day at a time. Cravings kick in when you're hungry. So I encourage you, start out with a good, healthy breakfast. And then don't skip any of the meals throughout the day. When it comes meal time, eat. But eat the good, wholesome foods that you've learned about here. And then get regular exercise so that you're not tired enough to be, so that you are tired enough to sleep well. And when you get the regular rest at night, plenty of rest, you'll be less likely to want to go for those addictive foods. And avoid situations that trigger those kind of cravings, like watching certain TV shows, Food Network, etc., or going and standing in front of the concession stands, or finding yourself in the in front of the vending machines. There's very little in most vending machines that falls in this healthful category. So it might actually mean that you avoid certain friends. You might have to choose healthy options at potluck dinners or when eating out, but you can break free of these foods. Just simply don't eat them. And the cravings will leave rather quickly once they are left out of the diet. If you crave sugar, try eating a piece of fruit. Replace it with something that's wholesome. And though hardly healthy, you could use other sweeteners such as pure maple syrup, or molasses, or sorghum, or honey, or sucanat, which is a granulated sugarcane juice. You could use some of those options to help make some of your sweeteners. They're a little less evil than the sugar, if you please the symbolism, because they still have some of the vitamins and minerals that are required in them to help metabolize them. And of course, you could use stevia, which is the natural plant extract, which I do recommend as a good sweetener alternative. So, getting taste without regret. Genetics play a part. Some people are just simply more susceptible to food addictions. Cravings and food addictions are physical. There's really not a moral basis for them. So in actuality, we're not talking about sin. We're talking about physical cravings. They are due to the properties in the foods themselves, and they interact with our natural biochemistry. So that's why we have food cravings. So if you're trying to get the taste without regret, if a food acts like a drug, treat it like a drug. It's more difficult for a smoker to cut back than it is to quit altogether. So maybe what you need to do at this point in time at least is just leave these foods off altogether. It's more difficult for an alcoholic to drink moderately than it is for them to quit drinking altogether. So more difficult for you to tease yourself with foods that have a hold of you than to leave them alone altogether. Why not break the addiction? Are you not achieving your goals still? let's go back and review the things again. Go back to Dr. Bernard's book, go back to your reversal strategy, and you will be able to be successful. Now, just a note about wellness and longevity. As I've stated before, longevity is not about getting older and older and more disabled. Longevity is about living well. There was a collaborative study team that was put together. Dan Buettner headed it up. And on his team, he had the National Geographic Society, and he also had the National Institute on Aging. They decided to put together a study where they would find 4 geographical areas in the world that had the highest number of centenarians per capita. And then they would go into those areas and they would study these people who had lived for more than 100 years. They would study their lifestyles, what they ate, what the people they associated with, the kind of environment that they were in. They would gather as much information as they could with their team of experts, and then they would come back and distill all this down to some simple principles and see if they could learn something from these people who had lived the longest, and to see if they could determine what factors it was that actually contributed to longevity. The results of this study was compiled in a book called The Blue Zones. And it's a New York Times bestseller now. I would recommend that you make it part of your reading as you learn more about health, because you're going to learn about things that people around the world have done to improve their health. People in these 4 zones around the world have made marvelous strides forward. In Sardinia, Italy, it's a little island that's just off the west coast of Italy. Okinawa, Japan. There's the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and then the Adventist population of Loma Linda, California, the 4 top areas of the world where people live. And he has listed out 9 things that are most common to these people. I'm going to let you read your book to determine what those 9 things were. But he had studied these old people very intensively before he made this statement. And he says the calculus, or the mathematics, the calculus of aging offers us 2 options. We can live a shorter life with more years of disability, or we can live the longest possible life with the fewest bad years. As my centenarian friends have showed me, the choice is largely up to us. So the choice is yours, friend. We've given you the tool. Now it's up to you to make it happen. God bless you.